What are you doing?
This has gone on long enough. I believe there is only one option left to end Karen's suffering.
We are talking about the movie The Exorcism of Karen Walker, which is also known as Aura. This one is directed and co-written by Steve Lawson. Now this one stars Shane Taylor and Rula Lenska. Rula Lenska is probably the most recognisable name, at least for me. And she has dealt with the devil before. If you are a fan of the Robin of Sherwood TV series, obviously she was Morgan of Ravenscar, and of course she was a servant of Lucifer in that TV show. Anyway, here we are in a low budget kind of British exorcism movie. So ultimately what it focuses on this, we've got this kind of couple, this guy and his kind of wife who's pregnant, and they move into an old family home. And there's been a bit of a history here. There was some type of kind of goings on involving other family members some years ago, involving the younger sister of this guy who has been put into a mental institute for the last 30 years. Now, as the male lead ultimately is kind of rifling around in this kind of old house, he discovers this old-fashioned camera which was used to take photos of people that would show their aura, but it also shows if someone is possessed by a demon, and it shows that the sister was actually possessed by a demon. So he goes to Rula Lenska's character, who's like a psychic medium, who agrees to help him try to exorcise the demon. Inevitably, obviously things don't go quite to plan. So let's talk about the exorcism of Karen Walker, aka Aura. So the odd thing about this film, it's clearly a British film, but it is pretending to be American. There's an American, the guy drives an American car with an American license. A lot of the actors have got American accents, well, faux American accents, but obviously it's clearly set in England, or clearly takes, filmed in England, I should say, with the majority of cast here being English. Now, Shane Taylor is English, he's the main actor, but he does have family in the States, from what I can ascertain. So I would say his accent is more kind of realistic, but his mother, for example, puts on this fake American accent, and it's just very distracting. I had the same problem with the film Pet Graveyard, which I reviewed a little while ago, and it's ultimately, so these low-budget British films can sell to an American audience. They need to try and have American characters. So unfortunately, it sounds weird. Now, like I said, Shane Taylor's accent, I don't think it's too bad. I think you can tell he's putting it on a little bit, but he's not too uncomfortable going into an American accent. But you can tell it's a little bit put on, and his mother is terrible. The actress who plays his mother does a terrible job of it. But obviously, it looks British. All the kind of like the housing is British, the weather, stuff like that. So it just doesn't really work. But anyway, let's talk about the actual, the less obvious, and what kind of works with this film. So I mean, to be fair, this movie is a fairly short running time. So the story is quite concise and kind of moves at a good pace, which is obviously a good thing. I think the movie is relatively well photographed here. You can kind of see everything. Nothing's kind of like photographed bad. I think the lighting's all pretty good. I actually thought I've read some people don't like the acting. No, I think that's down to the accents. This is the problem when you do this sort of thing. But I think if you can kind of look past that a little bit, the acting's actually not bad. Like the sort of conversation that he has with his wife and stuff like that, and Rula Lenska's character, actually seem like relatively normal kind of conversations, and the kind of the emotional reactions to things I thought actually quite good. It's just muddied by this kind of like this sort of like fake American accents. But I think if you take that aside, the acting isn't actually as bad as it might initially seem. Though this movie is quite kind of like not particularly effects driven. I do feel they do a good kind of job with the kind of the makeup and the kind of I mean, it's a fairly obvious, it's a fairly kind of like standard Exorcism plot, to be honest with you. But I feel it does, on a kind of a low energy one way, it still is somewhat effective. And I think the actual actress who plays Karen Walker does a pretty good job here of kind of selling it. I mean, the main issue here, I feel, is going to be the choice to have these this kind of like weird American English hybrid. Outside of that, the negatives for me for this one is that the movie's just very similar to any other Exorcism movie that you've seen. It doesn't do anything new with the genre outside of having this kind of photography angle, which really doesn't play that much of a big deal in the actual plot when it's all said and done. It's the kind of how they discover the demon, but outside of that, it's really not used for much else. And then it just kind of goes into very much a standard kind of Exorcism plot. One of the things that annoyed me the most outside of the accents were the really obvious foreshadowing and the really obvious twist. The twist you can see coming from halfway through the film. You know, it's just so obvious. And then Rula Lenska's kind of psychic character has said, "Are we going to set some ground rules? So you must definitely not do this, and you must definitely not do that." You think, well, clearly that's going to go out the window, and of course it does. But there doesn't seem to be, because if you do this, it's going to be really bad. But there never seems to be. So the kind of the world building that this movie does, it kind of doesn't kind of sort of like stick to its own rules to a certain degree. So I feel that the actual writing of this film is probably the weakest part for me, and the decision to kind of like have this weird American hybrid situation. But it's overall, it's not a bad film, I don't think. It's not, you know, it's just a very kind of generic Exorcism film. I actually quite like Rula Lenska's character in this. I mean, there's no like, you know, Catholic exorcisms and stuff, Catholic priests in that, is there? So it takes a slightly different route among the exorcism angle. But it's, you know, ultimately it all ends up kind of being more or less the sort of same thing that you've seen before. But I quite like Rula Lenska's character in this. I thought she actually was quite good. And I actually quite like the relationships between the guy and his wife. Not so much the mother, because she was a bad actor, and the guy and kind of Rula Lenska's character. But it just does some really obvious things like, oh, you mustn't do this, so clearly that's going to happen. So it's kind of one you can skip, but if you just like exorcism movies, I feel it's a passable film. I feel it's kind of, it doesn't kind of like, it will be, you know, looked at as a bad film as such, just a very kind of like run-of-the-mill film ultimately. Yeah, but there you go. So yeah, not bad. Watch it if you really like exorcism films, but it's low budget and kind of, it's not going to blow you away. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What do you think, mate? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.